Hello there. This is the third video that I'm doing on the Kobo Ellipsa, and in this video we're going to talk a little bit about the details around the battery life for the Kobo. We're going to go into how Bluetooth keyboard can be utilized with the device. We're going to look a little bit more at advanced notebooks. There's a few details that was missed out on the video tour. And then we're going to do a little bit of a fun exercise, I think, which is going to be a pixel density test. And so we'll kind of frame that and talk about what the goal of that is. And you can see if you can tell the difference between a 300 versus a 227 PPI screen. So all that and more in this video. But let's start off taking a little bit of a detailed analysis in terms of the battery's results compared to other devices that are also e-note takers. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so here we have the Kobo Ellipsa on top. It's right next to the Kindle Scribe, which is appropriate since those two devices compete directly with each other. But I've also included devices from books, Remarkable, Supernote. There's at least one device from each of the main manufacturers of e-note taking devices, and all the top sellers for each company is represented. You've got the Note Air 3C, the Remarkable 2, and the Supernote A5X. So we'll see how the Kobo compares to these kind of flagship devices. Now, right off the bat, there's a little bit of a trouble because Kobo has the smallest battery size of all the devices, including the Nomad, which has a larger battery but a smaller screen size. This doesn't bode well for how Kobo will perform, but let's see how the results actually played out. Now we'll start with standby with screen off, and this is basically when the device has all the battery saving features turned off, but when you power off the device, it remains in a standby mode, meaning that when you press the power button or you open a sleep cover, if you have one of those, then the device will be active and ready to be used in maybe 1 or 2 seconds. So that's basically what that represents. And the battery drain for the Ellipsa in that mode is really a respectable 0.03%. In fact, it's the second best on this list, although the Scribe, frankly, is right there. And, since these are approximations, the margin of error, they're pretty much the same. But nevertheless, the Kobo performed quite well on this particular metric. In a similar vein, there's a screen on standby, and this is where the device is not powered off at all. The screen is ready, you just have to start interacting with it to turn pages or to write. So you get a little bit more battery drain in this case because the system is running. And in this particular case, you get 0.8% of drain, which is high. If you throw out the Remarkable 2 that has a really unusual amount of drain for this particular state, it's the highest of all the devices remaining on the list, and that generally cluster around 0.4, 0.5%. So in this particular case, it looks like the size of the battery made an impact. The last category is around Wi-Fi, and here it wasn't measured at all. And the reason why is that even though the battery saving features are turned off, Kobo has a default feature where Wi-Fi, if not active, will shut down in roughly 10 minutes. So there's really no way to turn on Wi-Fi and have it stay on without constantly interacting with the device. And so it's not particularly practical even to measure this because this is not a real-world situation. If you're using the Kobo device, it will shut down automatically. When you need to go back to Wi-Fi and it's activated, the device, at the time it needs to, will reconnect to Wi-Fi, which takes a few seconds, and then Wi-Fi is reactivated again for another 10 minutes or so. So not a bad way of setting up the system. I think it's a good way to conserve battery life reasonably for a device like the Kobo Ellipsa, but it's not possible to measure Wi-Fi drain as a result. As we turn our attention to front lighting, I measure full and half cold front lighting, although I found that the color temperature doesn't matter, that you get similar results regardless of whether it's fully warm, cold, or somewhere in between. However, what does matter in this situation is the battery size. This is probably the highest correlation of all devices between battery size and performance. And unsurprisingly, the Kobo does not fare well. With full front lighting, it burns about 6.5% of battery drain per hour. That's the worst of all devices, and a bit worse than the Scribe. But what I was really surprised at is half cold front lighting. That actually was significantly worse compared to the Field at 2.9%. A fraction of, or I would say the Scribe is a fraction of the drain in this half cold front lighting scenario. So front lighting, regardless of what setting you have, will perform worse on this device than other devices that have front lighting. Not a surprise that battery size really plays a factor here. Last two categories are around novel reading and note-taking. And for novel reading, the Ellipsa did a surprising 0.5%. It actually matched the Kindle Scribe's performance, and this makes sense in a sense that both devices are easily reading first and optimized for that experience. E-reading itself is not a particularly power-hungry activity, as it's only using energy as you go from page to page. So maybe perhaps surprising that it was as good as the Scribe, but not surprising that it did well overall. A very different story, however, for continuous note-taking. For those that don't know, the way that I measure this is I start the stopwatch, I write continuously for at least 10 minutes, and then I wait for the battery counter to go down. So usually my writing sessions tend to average somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes on a test, and then I see what the battery drain is from that. And for the Kobo, it was 17.5%, easily the worst on this list, and with the Scribe coming in, almost, a little over a third of that. So the continuous note-taking battery drain for the Ellipsa is significantly worse than the Scribe and worse than other devices as well. Just a reminder, though, that this test is somewhat extreme. I mean, the time period of it isn't that unusual, but normally when you're taking notes, it's not as intensely as this test measures. So it's really meant to measure an extreme situation. So if you were doing general note-taking, the Kobo is suggesting here that it would last for 5 hours, but your real use would probably be much greater because you wouldn't be writing as intensely as I did in this test. Nevertheless, the relative scores are very relevant and definitely a lot of battery drain in this particular situation. So there you have it. Those are the results for the Kobo Ellipsa 2E. Okay, so now that we've seen what the battery life is, let's look at a couple more features of the device. We'll focus on using a Bluetooth keyboard, and we'll focus on some advanced notebook features that I didn't show in the previous video. Okay, so we're going to do a quick demonstration of how a Bluetooth keyboard can work with a Kobo Ellipsa. And you'll start by going to More, and then Settings, and then Bluetooth Connection, and then you just pair like you would with any Bluetooth device, and we've done that here already. So let's go ahead and see this in action. Now, it's important to note that neither in basic nor in advanced notebooks is there an ability to use a keyboard. So you won't be able to type in those situations, but you can type for annotations. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And we'll just pick a book at random and highlight a word, and now I'm going to go ahead and add a note, and let's see the keyboard in action. So it's pretty responsive. It's not too bad. There is a little bit of a visual artifact if you really start typing a little bit faster, and you saw that example. I should point out that while this is a good solution if you're using long notes, the on-screen keyboard actually works pretty well, and I'll just show you an example of that. So this is also very responsive. And if you're doing short notes, the on-screen keyboard is probably all you need, but Yeah, if you're definitely doing longer, more detailed annotations, then a Bluetooth keyboard certainly works, and that's what it looks like. Okay, there's a few things that wasn't covered in the visual tour as it relates to advanced notebooks, and I want to go ahead and show that here, so that extra functionality. And we'll start with, I'm going to go ahead and write a word here, like so. And if I take the stylus and do a stroke down, it creates this space. And if I take the stylus and I do a stroke up, it eliminates the space. So if I spelled a word wrong, I could always just insert a stroke as so. So that's an interesting feature they have. There's another feature too where if I underline something, it will create this kind of graphic image. They call it a header, but essentially it's just this specialized line that they put under the text. That's another thing. And then finally, the last thing that I want to demonstrate, and this is probably the coolest of these things, is that there is something called, I don't remember what they call it, but it's kind of like a scribble erase feature. Let's go ahead and see that in action. Like so. This is very similar to a feature in, very stubborn, very similar to a feature that we've recently seen in the Books Note Air 3C, and actually other devices are getting that as well. And it's called, it's an AI feature in the Books device, and I think it's called Strike Through Erase. I might have that wrong. But my criticism of that, although I thought it was really cool, and I'm glad they added that, my criticism was in the Books device that if you wrote, say a sentence and you use that scribble erase, it would leave, a few artifacts. It wasn't a clean erase. I'm finding it to be a little bit better applied with the Kobo, and so it's just a shame that they didn't incorporate that particular feature into the normal notebooks, because I think they did a really good job of implementing that, better than Books, in my opinion. But anyway, those are the features that I didn't show in the visual tour, and now you pretty much know everything the advanced notebooks can do. One more thing I want to share about the device, and that's how it sounds. I'm going to put the device close to the microphone, which I have right up here, and then we'll get a sense of what it's like to write on the device. I actually like the sound. Anyway, let's take a listen. So that's what that experience is like. I think they did a pretty good job. It doesn't feel like a writing on glass experience. It does, I'm not going to say paper-like, but it certainly has a textured sound, in my opinion. I found that to be pleasant. So anyway, that's what that experience is like. Okay, that's going to take us then to the last piece of this video, which is the pixel density test. And let me explain exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. See, the thing is that while the Kobo Ellipsa has a 227 ppi screen, that's particles per inch screen, and that's the standard generally for 10-inch screens, the Scribe has a 300 ppi. That's the highest density screen of an e-ink device. And so a lot of people basically say that they can really tell the difference between the 227 and 300, and some people even say that they'll never go back and they're going to wait for other devices when they too can have a 300 ppi screen. But the thing is, I don't really see a tremendous difference between the two. In fact, I'm really hard-pressed to see a difference. And so for me, it's kind of 6 to 1, half dozen the other. And it's not that I don't believe that people don't see the difference. I actually very much believe they do. It's that I can't discern that difference, and I wonder if other people can as well. And so the purpose of this test isn't to try to, fool anybody or try to make a point. It's actually designed to help you. So you may be a potential purchaser of a device, and you may be asking yourself, ooh, I wonder if I should hold out for a 300 ppi device, or is 227 okay for me? Am I ambivalent about which type of screen I have? And so I'm going to go through a series of videos, really short videos, that basically will compare the Kobo Ellipsa with the 227 screen versus the Kindle Scribe with the 300 ppi screen. You won't know which one is which until we reach the end, and then I'll announce that, and then you can decide whether that pixel density is meaningful for you or not. And if it is meaningful, then that means that you either should look into the Scribe, or you should hold off on buying an e-note-taking device, particularly if you're going to use it partly for reading, until another device has a 300 ppi screen. Or conversely, maybe you don't have any concern or can barely discern the differences, and in which case you've got a lot more current options available to you. So that's the point of this. I tried my best to do these videos. The one thing I will say is when you focus on the images, try to focus on the center of the screen. That's where it's going to be the most defined. You will see blurriness on the periphery, and that's not the screen, it's the focus of the camera. So try to focus somewhere in that center area, and then look to the two screens and see if you can figure out which is which. All right, I'll run those tests now, and then we'll give you the answers at the end. Okay, here is the first example, and we're going to focus on text. So the idea here is to try to see which device has the sharper text, or specifically, can you discern which device has the sharper text. I put a red stripe in the middle just to hide the bezels so it's not clear which device is which, at least from that perspective. So basically, try to find a word, maybe if you can find an identical word in each paragraph or a letter. And is there one that looks sharper or crisper than the other, or do they look about the same? That's pretty much what we're trying to identify here. Okay, let's go on to the next test. Okay, so in this particular case, we're looking at two images of book covers. Again, one being the Kindle Scribe, the other being the Kobo Ellipsa 2e. And take a look at something, a fixed point in one image, and then try to compare that to the other. And again, the question we're trying to identify is, are you able to discern that one image is crisper, seems to have a higher resolution than the other? So that's the point of the test, and we're using this book cover as a proxy for that. So give it another few seconds, and then we're going to go on to the next test. Okay, before we get to the last screen, I thought I'd get a little cheeky here, and I went ahead and threw in a new contender. I'm just going to let you know that the one on the right is the Note Air 3C. I'm still not going to identify which one in this case is on the left. But basically, I just want to throw this to kind of give a highlight of why I do enjoy Color e-ink. There's a lot of criticism around the current generation of Color e-ink, and it's deserved. There's a lot of good foundation for why people don't like it, a lot of limitations to color. But I think that, at its best, it adds something to the black and white e-ink experience, and it just pops a little bit more. In this case, we can see the title of the book, at least the header, Babel, has a little bit of a gold tint on the 3C, which of course is missing on the black and white version. And I just think it adds something, and it adds something positive. Now, of course, if we had the actual cover of Babel, we would notice that the colors would pop a lot more on the actual color. They're a bit muted here. But still, I think the effect is positive, and this is one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of Kaleido 3. Anyway, let's go on to the final test and say goodbye to the Note Air 3C. Okay, this is the last kind of comparison between the two devices. In this particular case, we're in each one's respective notebook app, and I wrote down the phrase writing example vertically on each device. And so try to write them as close as possible. Obviously, it's a little bit imperfect, but take a look at any of the particular letters that stick out for you and compare them between the two. Does one look sharper than the other? Or do they look about the same? The fonts aren't identical either. It's as close as I could get them, but hopefully this gives a sense of how these appear relative to each other. Okay, I hope you found that fun. Let's go ahead and give you those answers. The first two images, that is the one with the book text on each screen and then the one with the book cover on each screen, those both had the Kindle Scribe on the left and the Kobo Ellipsa on the right. The last two screens, the one that also had the book cover, but had the book covers, but had the color image on the right, and then the handwriting example, those both had the Kobo Ellipsa on the left, and the alternate device, first it was the Note Air 3C, then it was the Kindle Scribe, was on the right. So that is the answer to that, and hopefully you have a sense now of whether the pixel density is a meaningful measurement for you, and then can carry on accordingly. So that was the point of that. I hope this was a helpful video. I think we've kind of fleshed out all of the measurements and demonstrations related to the Kobo. I'm ready to give my review, and that's going to be in the next video. So I hope to see you there.